Well, good morning, everyone. We'll call this meeting to order. And are there any declarations of pecuniary interest in regards to the items on this Planning Council?
I'm going to recuse myself of pecuniary interest on one matter, which is, I don't know the number of it, but I put my name in the book.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kay is away on vacation, so won't be joining us today. And Councillor Wienko has taken all his water samples to the post office and will be here shortly. So our first resolution, we have to adopt the agenda. And it is moved by Councillor Bocek, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that Council adopts the agenda of the September 10, 2018 Planning Council meeting as either amended or circulated. Are there any suggestions for amendment? So our first resolution, we have to adopt the agenda as circulated. And it is moved by Councillor Bocek, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Thank you. The first part of the meeting is to hear some shore road closings. So this morning there are two public meetings scheduled for shore road closing applications. I'll briefly summarize the procedure. First, the Deputy Clerk will advise Council as to when, how, and to whom notice of the public meeting was circulated. Next, the Deputy Clerk will advise of the purpose and effect of the bylaw and provide for any other information that is relevant to the application. From there, the applicant and members of the public will have an opportunity to speak to the bylaw being considered. Council will then consider the bylaw immediately following. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to the Municipal Act SO 2001 C25 as amended to deal with the following proposed road closing bylaws. 2018-91 for Zeller, and 2018-92 for 1820435 Ontario Corporation. Madam Clerk.
Notice of the public meeting was published in a newspaper and notice was sent to the abutting neighbors in the close proximity of the property at least 20 days prior to today's meeting.
Thank you. And are you taking over up here also? Okay. Wearing two hats today.
Yes. So the first application is for 126 Moccasin Trail. The shore road allowance has been requested to be closed for future construction purposes. The total area to be sold is 487 square meters at a rate of $8 per square meter for a purchase price of $3,896 plus HST. No comments were received from the public or agencies, and staff have no concerns with this application.
Is the applicant here today? Anything you wish to add at this point?
I don't think so.
Nothing? Are there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? I don't see any. I'll give you one last chance to say something before we bring it into Council's hands.
Thank you very much.
That's okay. Okay. So the resolution, Council, is moved by Councillor Bocek, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that Council pass bylaw 2018-91 being a bylaw to stop up and close the shore road allowance in front of 126 Moccasin Trail. So open it up to council for questions or comments. Councillor Edwards.
Just curious, what is the future construction that's anticipated?
We're going to be planning to, or hoping to tear down our whole cottage and build a slightly larger cottage on the existing cottage and on the shoreline.
Future cottages to be 1,500 square feet on the main floor and approximately 500 on the lower floor walkout. For a total of 2,000 square feet living area.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Cooper?
I very much doubt this is the case, but just curious, there's not any crown land adjacent to any of this?
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? Sorry, Councillor Bochek, you're
In favor.
in favor? Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you. And our second application, Madam Clerk?
The second shore road allowance application is for 13192 Georgian Bay shore. The shore road closing has been requested to be closed for future construction purposes. And the total area to be sold is 3,993 square meters at a rate of $8 per square meter for a purchase price of $31,944 plus HST. No comments were received from the public or agencies, and staff have no concerns with this application as well.
Thank you. Is the applicant here today? Sir, anything you wish to add?
Nope.
Okay. Any members of the public wish to speak to this application? I don't see any hands, so I'll give you the last chance to say something also.
The reason we're going to purchase this is because we're going to be living about 2,000 square feet. And part of our problem was that the hydro lines are right behind us. We didn't realize at the time we had to be 15.5 feet away from the lines. And so that's the reason we have to build it forward.
Okay, good information, thank you. So, council, the resolution is moved by Councillor Bochek, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that council pass bylaw 2018-92, being a bylaw to stop up and close the shore road allowance in front of 13192 Georgian Bay shore. So open it up to council for questions or comments. Councillor Edwards.
I'm just curious, and I really direct this to Nick. We have to move forward. Are we going to still be able to meet the setbacks? I don't want to see the man spending $31,000 and then find out that there's a problem as far as the setbacks are concerned.
Through you, Your Worship, when I look at the survey, it looks like there's lots of room to satisfy setbacks.
Okay.
I think overhead wires may be a factor that pushes it forward, I'm not sure. But when I look at the survey that I see on the display screen here, it looks satisfactory.
So, yeah, I just want to make sure that we don't end up with a problem if somebody spent $31,000 and then finds out we can't meet the setbacks. Okay, that's fine.
Councillor Cooper.
Another question for Nick. So in the shore road allowance, Nick, it's hard to see these plans. Is the high water mark showing here?
I don't see it labeled as such, but usually that's the case, as they show the high water mark of the 177.4. But I don't see it labeled here, so it's hard to tell what the actual survey shows.
So, but in terms of, if we had a planning application, we would require a survey that showed the high water mark, is that correct?
That is correct.
And secondly, just remind me, I'm trying to remember whether, if you own or do not own the Shore Road allowance, how does that factor into lot coverage?
So these people are purchasing the shore road allowance, so that will be part of the lot coverage.
And if you don't own it, it's not part of the lot coverage?
Correct.
Oh, I was under the impression quite the opposite. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Morning, Councillor Wienko. Councillor Edwards?
Well, I just assume that before the building permit is issued, that we're going to have the high water mark showing. I mean, I would assume that's the case now.
That is the case.
Nick, I'm not sure, but the gentleman may have a survey there. I'm looking on our
I think it's on.
council thing, but I don't see it. It's unclear. So it is on there? Okay, perfect.
It's a different survey than this one.
So that's the latest registered survey then? Okay. So are you going to need a copy of that survey, or?
Through your worship, that may not be a registered survey, it just could be a survey that was submitted by the surveyors to the applicant. The registered survey is what is shown on the screen. But for planning purposes, what the applicant has is what's required, I believe, for the planning applications. What's on the screen is required for the shore road allowance application.
So Nick, is there any way of telling whether this survey is exactly the same as this with just a minor modification?
It has a building on it, actually.
This shows a building.
This shows a building.
Okay.
So it's different than the one on the screen.
And what about the dates and so on? So I don't see any dates on this one. It's scanned part of the survey.
November 21st, 2017.
So, and do we know what this one is?
Through your worship, the date on this plan is October 17th, 2017.
Okay, so that one's the most recent.
But this is just the draft, it was registered after that date.
Is that one registered, Nick?
It is not.
Do we know if this survey has been registered, or a survey?
Yes.
Through your worship, the registration number is in the report, listed as 35R25729. So it has been registered.
Okay.
Which one?
The drawing on the right-hand side in the presentation, as well as what has been shown in the application on the 4th page, listed as registered plan, has been registered.
I'll go to Councillor Wienko first.
Just for the knowledge of council, 6 Mile Lake, we have a contract with Parks Canada that our water levels are not to fluctuate more than plus or minus 3 inches in the summertime. So
This is Georgian Bay, though.
this is 6 Mile. I thought we were on 6 Mile Lake one.
No.
Sorry. The first one was 6
No,
Mile Lake.
That was done
Oh.
already. We're on the second one,
Right.
13192 Georgian Bay Shore, so. Councillor Edwards?
I think we need to, going forward, have a checklist to make sure we've got the right survey and that it's showing the high water mark. I mean, I think it would be benefit for everybody, so if Nick, you had something like that so that we don't get into this issue. And I guess the secondary question is, the one that the gentleman has presumably is the one that should be registered. I mean, we went through this high water mark because of, nastiness that I got into 7 years ago. So I would
Is there a
think we
registration?
need to make sure that the right one is registered. You agree?
On there?
Yeah, for planning purposes, we need a registered survey.
But the point is, Nick, if it doesn't have the high water mark, then we've got a problem. I mean, the situation that I brought to council, the contractor said they were 100 feet from the water, and they were 18 feet from the high water mark, and that is the reason we now have required surveys showing the high water mark. So if we're going to have rules, we need to make sure they're enforced. So it looks like it's been done, but I want to make sure that the right thing gets registered, and that's the one with the high water mark on it.
Yes, so for when the applicant comes in with a Planning Act application, if necessary, or a building permit, the survey will have to be registered, so we check that.
Okay, so the new survey will be registered, okay.
It'll have to be for planning purposes or building purposes.
Okay. So our clerk is trying to open up the thing, but she's gonna have to duck out and shut her other computer off so she can open up the registered one on here. So we'll just take a couple-minute recess. Okay. Yep.
Get a coffee. Thank you.
I don't appear to be.
I can't get on. I have one bar now.
Oh, I've got 3.
I have one. I just can't get onto the iCompass.
John was here. Should really have 5 bars in here.
Come and have a look.
Good morning.
Paul? I sent you an email. That's pretty.
So 21st is the back.
Let me pencil it in on this.
The 27th is safe, right? You're not going to the sick day dinner?
Dave, when I do get on, I have one bar. And then it kicks I've never had an issue. Yeah, there I am, I got one bar. And I don't think it'll, sure. Okay, well, I never know. Let's see how long it lasts.
We've lost two.
Yes.
No, now we've lost quorum. No, now we got quorum.
Where'd you get a scrum?
Cynthia in there, Paul?
Yes.
I'd like to call us back to order.
Yes.
We've pretty much got this sorted out. Okay, so we'll call us back to order again. So what is registered at the registry office is this survey. And I will go to Nick, but for shore road closing purposes, this is satisfactory, but you'll be requesting the other one be registered at
That
some
is-
point in time for the planning purposes.
That is correct, Your Worship.
Okay. Does that satisfy council? Councillor Edwards?
For today, but let's get to one common survey going forward, that's all.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knew there was a second survey at the staff level at this point, so. Okay. So, now that we've sorted that out. I think I already read the resolution and we're at the council level. Are there any other questions? Seeing no other questions, I will call the question on this resolution. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Okay, thank you. Okay, so that closes our Shore Road closing meetings. So this morning, there's a public meeting scheduled for two proposed zoning bylaw amendments. I'll briefly summarize the procedure. First, the deputy clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom notice of the public meeting was circulated for the proposed amendments being considered. The deputy clerk will also advise of the appeal procedures. Next, staff will advise of the purpose and effect of the bylaws and provide any other information that is relevant to the applications, and the deputy clerk will summarize any correspondence on file. From there, the public will have an opportunity to speak to the amendments being considered through the mayor. After the public discussion, the public meeting will be closed. Council will then consider the bylaws immediately following. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act to deal with the following proposed amendments. And the first one is zoning bylaw 18/19 for Macmillan. And the second one is zoning bylaw 18/25 for Bradbury. To our clerk.
Notice of the public meeting were sent by first-class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 to 800 meters of the property, subject to the proposed applications, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the applications. These notices were sent at least 30 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed applications and a key map showing the location of the properties or a description of the lands to be affected by the proposed amendments. Other relevant information may also have been provided. These circulations were all provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and the Township of Georgian Bay official plan. Members of the public are advised at this point that unless they make an oral or written submission to council before council makes a decision on these applications, that any subsequent appeal to the local planning appeals tribunal may be dismissed by the tribunal. Anyone who wishes to be notified of council's decision respecting the proposed zoning bylaw amendments must submit a written request to the clerk's office.
Thank you. And we'll go to staff, and we are dealing with the top one and the bottom one. The other three were done in a previous meeting, and we'll be dealing with them later on in the meeting. To our staff.
Good morning. So the first zoning bylaw amendment that we have today is for 14 Island 270 on 6 Mile Lake. The zoning of the property is shoreline or 6 Mile Lake residential, exception 11, and it is designated 6 Mile Lake in the Township of Georgian Bay official plan and general waterfront in the district official plan. The subject property is shown here on the island, outlined in black. And an aerial view of the subject lands, as you can see outlined in red on the screen. And you can see that the property is significantly vegetated. There is a rock face on the property, which there are photos of later on in the presentation. So the application is requesting a reduced front yard setback where 30 meters is currently designated on the property to 20 meters, a maximum dwelling height of 8 meters, where 6 meters is currently permitted, and the construction of a detached garage at the same time as a principal dwelling. And the property would be given site-specific zoning to 6 Mile Lake Residential, exception 53, where it's currently 6 Mile Lake Residential, exception 11. So just to give you an idea of the Schedule A from our zoning bylaw, so the SR 6-11, if approved, would be changed to SR 6-53. So this is a survey of the property, just to give you some information. The proposed dwelling would be located here. So it's currently proposed as the principal dwelling, and in future, they would convert this building into a sleeping cabin and build a future cottage. So you can see an outline here of the rock outcrop. I have some photographs later on in the presentation to show the slope of that and the location of the detached garage. So the principal cottage that they would be building now would be 56 square meters, which complies to the size requirements when they go to convert it into a future sleeping cabin, and they would comply with the height as well. The proposed garage location complies with the maximum size permitted for a detached garage. And in future, the cottage that they are building would comply with the cottage size for gross floor area and height if the height is approved to go up to the 8 meters as opposed to the 6 meters, which currently exists. So currently, the zoning requires a 30-meter setback, but given the steepness of the topography of that rock, the applicant is requesting a 20-meter setback for that future cottage, which would put the rear wall of the dwelling at the very front of that rock slope so that it is not protruding beyond the tree line. and some photos to give you an idea of what the property looks like. So this is looking towards the proposed building area, and as you can see, there is significant vegetation. And just a closer view of the property. As you can see, it's well treed, so any view of the proposed development will be very minimal. And this is another view of the subject lands. And this is a view from the proposed dwelling, which in future would become the sleeping cabin, looking towards the shore. And then this is a view from the proposed sleeping cabin, looking towards where in future the detached dwelling would be located. And another view from the proposed dwelling, which would be the future sleeping cabin, looking again towards where the future dwelling would be located, and looking east. And then this is the view to the rear. As you can see, the rock face. I do have a picture from the applicant, which is from the winter time, so it's a bit easier to see the rock face that's coming up. And then another view of that rock face. So as you can see, it's quite steep there. So if the cottage was located on top of the rock face, the view would be more significant than if the back wall is located in front of it. And then another view of that increased elevation. So this is a photo submitted from the applicant where you can see it better in the wintertime without all of the foliage in the summer. To give you an idea of what the future cottage would look like. The designs have not been finalized yet, but this gives you an idea of what they're proposing, a single story with a loft. And the other view of the future cottage. And just an idea of what the floor plan would look like. And the second floor. This would be the proposed detached dwelling, which in future would become the sleeping cabin, so it complies with the size and the height requirements of a sleeping cabin. So the kitchen facilities that they would be using in the meantime would have to be removed, and that would be through an undertaking agreement with the building department. The loft is going to be removed because it's not permitted in a sleeping cabin to have a loft. These were just the preliminary plans that the applicant had submitted for the application. And the proposed detached garage. So the applicant is proposing to construct the detached garage at the same time as the principal dwelling. So our zoning bylaw requires the principal dwelling to be in existence on the lot prior to any construction of any accessory buildings. But given the property being a water access only property and with the half load season coming up, the applicant has requested for both buildings to be constructed at the same time, and staff see no issues with this given the timelines. So the intent of the front yard setback provisions are to ensure there is a balance between natural vegetation and built form, and to protect the aesthetic quality of the waterfront. So given the amount of vegetation on this property, there will be minimal view, and the 20-meter setback is in keeping with the setbacks on 6 Mile Lake. When the property was created, I believe back in about 2006, they put in that 30-meter setback in order to minimize the view from the water. After visiting the site and seeing the topography of that rock face, staff feel that the 20-meter setback is appropriate for this lot. The other lots where the 30-meter setback, given their topography, made the visual impact much less. And the increase in height, the proposed detached garage and the proposed dwelling at this time will not be visible from the water. And the future dwelling, which is requesting the 8-meter height, will not exceed the tree line and will not be visible from the water. So the application is consistent with the surrounding properties. Staff see no issues with the detached dwelling and the detached garage being built at the same time. At the time of the report, there was no public comments. I'm not sure if any have been received in the last week. I was away. But staff have recommended that the bylaw be passed today if there's no public comments made at this meeting.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, any comments?
The District of Muskoka has no objection, provided that a site plan control is implemented to address phosphorus management, stormwater management, and vegetation retention and replanting. 2 letters of support were received from Sandra and John Wycraft and Alice and Bill Kerr.
So we'll go to the applicant or a representative of the applicant today. Sir, anything you wish to add?
Not particularly. I think they did a good job summarizing our intentions.
Thank you. And are there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Don't see any hands. And as for everyone else, any last comments or?
I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Okay. Okay. So council, I'll bring this into your hands. At this point, the resolution is moved by Councillor Bocek, seconded by Councillor Edwards. And it's a two-part motion as generally. Be it resolved that council directs staff to consider the public comments received for zoning bylaw 18/19, which is 14 Island, 276 Mile Lake, and prepare a recommendation report and bylaw that will be brought back to a subsequent council meeting for consideration. Or, since we don't have any public comments, perhaps you wish to consider this. Be it resolved that council adopts bylaw 2018-85, being a zoning bylaw amendment for 14 Island, 276 Mile Lake. So I open it up to council for questions or comments. Councillor Bocek.
Thank you. My question is for our planning department. I noticed that there was a consent agenda approval in 2005 where the 30-meter setback was imposed and a site plan agreement drawn up. In your report, it says that there would be a new site plan agreement. Could the old site plan agreement not just be amended if this were to pass?
Through you, Mayor Braid, yes, the old site plan agreement would be amended to whichever is approved in the footprint of the proposed dwellings.
Councillor Rienko.
Do we know when those two comments that came in support, do we know where they're located? Are they on the island or across on the mainland, or do we know?
Through your worship, I don't have that information. The planning department may have that information.
Maybe the proponent knows.
Yeah, I can answer that question. The Rycrafts are directly across the lake, looking at us.
Yep.
And the Kerrs are across the lake, kitty corner, but they also own the property beside us on the island as well.
Okay, so they're basically looking at you, and okay,
Yeah.
if they're happy, then
There-
I'm happy.
There's two
Yeah.
properties that view us directly, the Rycrafts and John, his last name escapes me. I've spoken with both of them. John didn't seem to have any concerns at all when we spoke. That's all I have.
Okay, that makes me happy.
Councillor Cooper.
Just a question for our planning department. So this is a request for height, exceeding the height allowable. Is there any specific reason that it has to exceed the height?
Through you, Mayor Braid, I believe it was so that they could add a loft space to the future dwelling.
And are lofts allowed?
Through you, Mayor Braid, yes, and it would be for the future cottage, so not what they would be building at this time. What they're constructing right now would be the detached garage, and this would be the detached dwelling now, and in future this would be converted into a sleeping cabin. The future dwelling would be limited to the 6-meter height, and they're proposing to increase that to the 8 meters, which is consistent with the height on 6 Mile Lake.
Two more questions, please. One is percentage lot coverage, and it may be in here, but I'm sorry, just wondered if you could tell me what that is.
Sure, through you, Mayor Braid.
Including all the structures that are planned, in other words.
Yep, through you, Mayor Braid, I do have that. Just give me one quick second. They do comply with their lot coverage. They would be they're well under their lot coverage, I believe. Sorry. Don't have that number, but if you give me 1 second, I can calculate it.
Sure.
Through you, Mayor Braid, they're at about 3% lot coverage with the future dwelling, the proposed dwelling, future sleeping cabin, and the detached garage.
And final question, if you don't mind, the main, the proposed main structure, what size is that, and how does it comply, or does it comply with the 6 Mile Lake planning documents?
Yep, through you, Mayor Braid, the proposed dwelling, which would in future be the sleeping cabin, is 56 square meters, about 600 square feet. So it's well under their allowable gross floor area.
That the main,
Or the future, Gwen?
yes,
It's about 200 square meters, and they would be permitted 275.
thank you.
Councillor Edwards?
I have a number of questions. So, if one was just coming in with the initial bunkie, would they be able to go ahead? I mean, does that meet all the requirements? The sleeping cabin, which we are then at some point going to turn into, or take the kitchen out. So I'm concerned about the issue of, we're doing this now, but we're gonna do something in the future. So, first question, would it pass the requirements if they were just coming in with the sleeping cabin?
Through you, Mayor Braid, an accessory building would be permitted before the principal dwelling. If they have constructed this dwelling as a dwelling, and then wanted to convert it to a sleeping cabin, size-wise and height, they do comply. The only thing that will need to be removed will be the kitchen, so the stove, cooking facilities, anything of that nature.
Right, and I assume the second question that I believe it's the $40,000 deposit or letter of credit will be required in order to ensure that the main building gets built. Is that correct?
Yep, through you, Mayor Braid. So when they do come in for the future cottage, which will be their main dwelling, and they convert this to a sleeping cabin, an undertaking agreement would be required through the building department. So when the future dwelling is constructed, they would have to, before they can get occupancy, they would have to remove that kitchen.
But no, there's another one, because we had this on a previous one, and then it was pointed out that we had changed in our fees and charges bylaw. I believe they have to, when they come in, because they're starting with the sleeping cabin, that they have to have a $40,000 letter of credit. Is that correct? Or if it meets all the requirements, then I think they're okay. But we had this issue before, and that's where the $40,000 number came. And that's why my first question: if they weren't coming in with the second quote building of the cottage, then the $40,000 wouldn't be required. I understand that. I think that's right. So that's the first question. Maybe that's answering it. Maybe the $40,000 letter of credit isn't required in this case.
Through you, Mayor Braid, they would be coming in for a detached dwelling. So this would have living facilities, washrooms, and a kitchen in it.
Okay, so then the question is, how do we ensure that the bathroom's all right. How do we ensure that the kitchen will be removed, etc.? Is there any sort of letter of credit or deposit, or is that totally conditional upon what happens with the building permit given for the main structure?
So through you, Mayor Braid, in future when they come in for their main dwelling, the larger dwelling that they're proposing, that's when an undertaking agreement would be required.
fair enough. Now, my other question is, we're asking for this, for the main building to be 6 feet higher than what is required by, what is limited by the bylaw, is that correct?
Your
2
ma-
meters, something over 6 feet?
Correct.
I'm just concerned with the precedent, because that would suggest to me that anybody on 6 Mile Lake will be able to come in and request that their building be six feet higher, because I haven't seen a strong case as to why they can't meet the normal height restriction. So that would be my concern, I guess, as well. I assume they're aware that they can't start doing wholesale cutting down of trees between the buildings and the water.
Yes, through your Mayor Braids, yes. And just to clarify, the height, 8 meters is the standard on 6 Mile Lake, which is what they're requesting. Currently, their zoning only permits them a 6-meter height.
Yeah, I'm confused.
Yeah. Run that by us again.
Correct. So when the lot was created back, I believe in about 2005, there was site-specific zoning put on this property and a couple other ones on this island, which restricted them to the 30-meter setback and a 6-meter building height. What the applicant is proposing is that 20-meter setback because of that rock outcrop and an 8-meter height. And the 8-meter height is standard on 6 Mile Lake.
So supplementary question, why was the 6 meters put on? Did we look back and see what's in the file as to, I mean, just a question, has something happened that, I mean, did the height change on the, I mean, I assume it was always 8 meters was the requirement, or was the allowance on 6 Mile. So why was this one restricted to 6 meters? And now we're removing them. I don't have any information as to why that previous council put that restriction on.
Through you, Mayor Braids, the only information in the report only referenced the 30-meter setback. There was no information on why the 6-meter height was put on the property, so I'm not sure the previous reasoning to that.
Maybe all knows the answer.
Councilor Bianco?
Yeah, I believe I was on council my first term when this island came up for subdivision, and we're looking at the back end of this island, which I think is south, and it rises up quite fast from the water, and it's not really prime lots because of the rise from the water, and even getting construction in there. I think when we subdivided this island, there was concern of getting equipment in there because of such a quick rise from the water. So I think at the time we said that because of the height of the properties at 30 meters back, we should limit the height of the cottages so it wouldn't go above the trees. But if it's not going above the trees and the neighbors across the way aren't worried about it, then I'm happy with that. But yeah, this is a fairly high piece of property.
But now we're going to be 20 meters, is that right? We're going to be 20 meters, and we're going to be 6 feet higher. I know elevation.
The elevation of the building is going to be considerably lower than the rock outcrop behind it,
Right,
correct?
I understand that.
That is
I guess
correct.
it's a question, and I don't know the property, but as to the slope of the, if the grade is going up and they had to be back 30, then obviously if you're going up 6 feet on the ground, then you're going to be at the same effect. So, Paul, you know the property, I don't.
Can I maybe shed a little bit of light on this?
Sure.
What Paul is saying is generally true. We're in a bit of a, I'm gonna say hole, for lack of better words. So our building, general building area where you see those 3 buildings situated on the lot, kind of offset of the middle, is fairly, it's much lower as the water. It goes up on the sides. So on one side in particular, it goes up quite a bit. And on the other side, it goes up as well, not quite as high, but that's where the rock outcropping comes in behind us. So if we're on the lot, the neighboring lot, for example, to the west, the buildings, the first floor of the buildings would probably be about, I'm going to say 15 meters higher than where we are. We are sitting at about, I think it's about 18 feet, 15 to 18 feet above the water level. So it's not quite as high as what you're thinking. It's sitting down a little bit lower, and the rock outcropping actually comes in behind.
So if I'm understanding this, if you had to go back and be on the rock outcrop, and you were allowed to have 6 meters, then you'd be significantly higher than where you're gonna be at 20 meters with 8.
Correct. So,
Okay, I'm totally outside.
if we were up on the rock outcropping, that rock outcropping is upwards of, 20 plus feet high.
I totally understand, because I got a variance for our sleeping cabin for exactly that rule, that reason.
Okay.
So I understand that.
And the 20 meters is the same as basically the neighbors, right?
Yep. Last question, why do we call it a garage on island? I mean, I know we had a consultant who said we should have snow plows and people would then be able to drive to their cottages in the wintertime, but, why do we call it a garage?
Are you guys considering that? That'd be great.
So through
That'll be
you,
the new council.
Dana?
through you, Mayor Braid, it would be the storing of motor vehicles, whichever those happen to be stored in that building, so it would be considered a garage.
Okay. Good, maybe we need to change the terminology.
Now, council, you wish to deal with this today? Okay, so I will cross off the first section. And the resolution will read, be it resolved that council adopts bylaw number 2018-85, being a zoning bylaw amendment for 14 Island 270 6 Mile Lake. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that one carries unanimously. Okay, and our next one, Dana?
Mr. Mayor, which one are we on here? Like, are we on 5A or?
We're on 5A now. For some reason, they got reversed on the agenda as to what we're doing, so. Zoning bylaw. That one. Okay, Dana, are you the lead on this one?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so our next zoning bylaw amendment, my apologies for going out of order, is for 20 Island 130 on the Severn River. And as you can see, the subject property is located in black. And just an aerial view of the subject lands outlined in red. As you can see, it's heavily vegetated. And the zoning of the property is shoreline residential type 1, and it is general waterfront in the township official plan as well as the district official plan. So the application for the zoning bylaw amendment is to recognize an undersized lot frontage. So this is a condition of consent. So the neighboring property neighboring cottage was encroaching on the subject lands. So a consent application went to Committee of Adjustment in June, and it was approved to correct this encroachment. So the minimum required lot frontage of the shoreline residential type 1 zone is 60 meters, and the application is proposing 52.48 meters. So as you can see, this is the subject lands in Schedule A of our zoning bylaw. To give you an idea of the encroachment, so this portion of the property was severed because the neighboring cottage was almost entirely built on the subject lands. So they are correcting that encroachment to have the cottage on its own standalone property, and the existing cottage is located wholly on the retained lands. So the lot frontage would go down to the 52 meters. So our official plan allows a undersized lot frontage for certain exceptions. So the encroachment of an existing neighboring cottage is one of those exceptions that allows us to recognize an undersized lot frontage. And just to give you an idea of the vegetation and the development on the subject land. So as you can see, the existing cottage is located there, and you can see the neighboring cottage. So the new property line is about here, which corrects that encroachment. It's about 12 meters from the side lot line. And then this is a view looking out from the subject lands across the bay, looking out to the Crown land, and then another view looking down the river. So the shoreline residential type 1 zone permits a 60-meter setback or 60-meter lot frontage, but in order to correct that encroachment, they needed to recognize the undersized lot frontage as a condition of consent. So in order for the consent to be finalized, the rezoning was one of those conditions. So staff have no issues with the undersized lot frontage since they have corrected it through the consent application, and I believe the District of Muskoka submitted a letter with no objections, and we have, at the time of preparation of the report, I did not receive any other letters of correspondence, but Amber would be able to address those. The applicant's representative is here if you have any questions for herself or if you have any questions for me.
Thank you, Dana. And Madam Clerk, was there any correspondence?
Ms. Sudby was correct. The District of Muskoka has no objections.
Okay. And as I understand it, the representative and the applicants are here? Or?
No, my sister was unable to come, so I'm here in her place to hopefully answer questions.
Okay. Anything you wish to add to Dana's presentation at this point?
I don't think so.
Okay. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak to this application? I don't see any hands going up, so anything before I bring it into council's hands?
I do have to answer your questions.
Okay. Thank you. So, council, again, this is a two-parted resolution. Moved by Councillor Bocek, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that council directs staff to consider the comments received for zoning bylaw 18-25 for 20 Island 137 River and prepare a recommendation report and bylaw that will be brought back to a subsequent council meeting for consideration. Or be it resolved that council adopt bylaw 2018-89 being a zoning bylaw amendment for 20 Island 137 River. So open it up to council for questions or comments. Councillor Edwards.
Could you just go back, the piece of property that is being cut out, yes, the piece on the bottom left. I understand that, but what is it being adjoined to?
For you, Mayor Braid, it is being adjoined to Lot 6, which is the neighboring property
Okay,
here.
So, but that's a condition of approval of this, that it has to be brought, so we're not creating a small lot on its own. It has to be merged in on title with that property.
Yes, through you, Mayor Braid, that is correct. So the severed portion would be merged with Lot 6. The full survey, it's about a 2.5 acre parcel that it would be adjoining to. The retained lands complies with the lot area. It's about 5,100 square meters.
Okay, just to confirm, so that, I until that takes place, that's a condition precedent with regard to us giving that approval, that it's approved, assuming it will be merged on title with the adjoining lot.
Through you, Mayor Braid, the merging was a condition of the consent application that went to Committee of Adjustment in June.
Councillor Bochuk?
Yeah, I'm willing to support this. I know it went through a rigorous committee of adjustments on the consent agenda, and I think we got all our questions answered at that point in time, so I'm willing to support this moving ahead with option B today.
Any other questions or comments? We willing to deal with this today? Thank you. So I'll cross off the first part. The resolution will read now. Be it resolved that council adopt bylaw 2018-89, being a zoning bylaw amendment for 20 Island 130 Severn River. Any final comments, questions? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously also. So that closes all of our public portions of our meetings. So congratulations, everyone. You want 5 minutes? Okay, we'll take 5 minutes.
Yeah, we went out of order. First day of our
No, I'm gonna leave again. Not sure whether I'm even gonna bother. Just ripping them down, what's the point? See some that don't comply, so from here, they're not 7.5 meters from the triangle.
Councilor Douglas was hot, so we turned the heat down, and now the rest of us are crazy. We didn't want to have a meltdown. Yeah, sorry.
Think about it.
You don't think you're in winter town. Yeah, exactly. Sorry. No, it's okay when I get things ready.
I'm also drinking a lot of water, so it's like, yeah, it chills you down.
My mom had a cousin.
We're not going.
not a public meeting, I don't need to say any of this. I just didn't know if you wanted any group comments. Dina? For the whole meeting. So I'll just. Yeah, that's all done. Yep, and then this one would be Nixon. Oh, I'm doing, this is me and that's me. Oh, so this is the. Okay. Oh, right, Canton. We're not gonna be, I don't.
Sure.
See, we have a lot of interested people.
Okay. I think we'll get started here. Nick, you're on for the first one, and we'll deal with them one at a time. There's, what, 5 here? And these have all been to the public before, for the public comments, and you're coming back with recommendations and that sort of thing?
Your Worship, you're right. There are 5 applications that are not subject to public meetings. 2 of them you have seen before. The other 3 are not required to be notified to the public because they're lifting a hold provision. So there's no need to notify the public when you're lifting a hold. So that's why there's 3 of them in the middle that are not subject to public meetings.
Okay.
The other
thank
2
you.
already have had public meetings.
Okay, so our first one is Moore Point Road.
That's correct. It's the Markovina application on page 59 of your agenda.
Okay.
And I'll apologize in advance that it's not on the PowerPoint, so we're just going to have to go with the agenda package that you have. But this was a previous application that was considered in April of this year. And at that time, it was deferred until the ice came out because there's a narrow water body involved. And at that time, we weren't able to see the true extent of the narrow water body. So in a narrow water body, your maximum projection of a dock is 7 meters. In this case, the proposed dock and ramp is going to be 18.24 meters. So 2.5 times what's allowed in the narrow water body. There's also a request for a side yard setback of 0 meters for the dock and the ramp, where 5 meters is required. There's also a freestanding deck that is proposed. The freestanding deck is required to have a 5-meter setback. It's proposed to have a 2.5 meter setback. And finally, there's a walkway. The walkway is required to have a 5-meter side yard setback. The proposed walkway would have a 2.5 meter side yard setback. The other thing that we have to mention is that this property fronts upon type 1 fish habitat. So the applicants were required to do a study. The results of that study determined that there was in fact no type 1 fish habitat on this property. So the other component of the application is to take the waterfront out of the type 1 fish habitat and zone it to the lakeside zone, which is a non-fish habitat zone. So the main concerns that we had was that the 0 meter side yard setback for the dock would have the potential to have boats parked on it that would infringe on the neighbor's view. The neighbors have not submitted any comments, and the applicant's agent has advised that it's not physically possible to park on that side of the dock because of the water depth. So in view of that, staff are recommending the application be approved with those setbacks that I mentioned, and the extent of the dock being 18.2 feet, dock and ramp being 18.24 meters, where 7 meters is required. So I'll leave it at that, Your Worship, and if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And I would note that the applicant and the applicant's agent are also here to answer any questions that I might not be able to answer.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Let me put the resolution on the table first. It's moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that Council approve bylaw 2018-93 for zoning bylaw 17/22 at 191 Moore Point Road. So open it up to Council. Councillor Edwards.
I guess my question is, what happens when the water is down 4 feet from where it is now or 5 feet from where it is now? Will the dock be in the same spot, or does the dock have to move out at that point? And what does it do for, quote, the width of the narrow water?
It's a floating dock that's proposed. So if the water decreases in height, the floating dock would have to be moved.
Okay, but that's the question I'm asking. How much water is underneath? I mean, if there were 4 feet of water underneath the dock at all places, then it could go down, it wouldn't have to be moved. But if there's only a foot of water and we have to go, you know, it goes down 4 feet, we obviously have to move out. So how does that fit into it? I mean, we're really a pretty high record, high water levels right now, and we all know this thing does go up and down.
Yeah, my understanding is the last time there was really low water levels, council passed a special bylaw that allowed them to be extended.
That's right.
So I would
2013.
I would assume that would have to happen again for if there's extreme low water levels to allow docks to be extended. In this case, the dock would not be allowed to be extended beyond the 18.24 meters, the dock and the ramp.
So, but what does it do to the width of, I guess the question is the passage width, is that then getting reduced? So, yeah, I mean, I think everybody's understanding the issues.
Councillor Bochek?
Yeah, I did do a site visit to the Markovina property and had a look at where the dock was going, and the report is correct on the facing the water on the right side of the dock. There is no provision for a boat to go there. There's a rock outcropping that extends out on that side of the dock. And if the water did go down that side of the dock, the rock would be above the surface of the water. You'd still have about 5 or 6 feet on the other side. As far as the view from the neighbor goes, I didn't see any way that the view could be impeded looking anywhere across the horizon at the front of the property. So I believe the right steps have been taken here, and really on this property there's no other option. And to have a property, a waterfront property with no ability to have a dock is very rare, but in this case this would be the only position that a dock would go on this property. So I would be in support of allowing this to happen.
Councillor Cooper?
Yeah, I have a few questions about this. Sorry. First of all, I think a number of properties in this area are able to have docking facilities just adjacently to them in, I don't know what's called Moore Point Bay or whatever, but there's sort of a marina facility there. So there is an opportunity for these people to get to a boat very quickly. I am concerned about a navigation hazard here as well. This dock is coming out into the bay, and there is an island sort of in the middle, and if somebody were coming through there, it may be a navigation hazard. The final point I would ask, this is a question though, Nick, is in terms of looking at this bay and where it faces, it sort of appears to be facing to the south west, and the next shoreline, is that not somewhere over in Midland or Pennant, or not Midland, but Port Nickel or something like that? In other words, 15 or so kilometers away?
Your worship, that is correct. There is no intervening land.
So won't this dock get completely bashed?
It's a floating dock that's meant to be removed every winter for the season and moved to the other side of the, to where the communal docking facility is.
That isn't my point, though. It's not just about the winter. You would obviously have to remove it in the winter, and the ice would, of course, destroy it. But we're also talking about a long distance for waves to travel in certain wind directions. So the southwest wind would be traveling a huge distance to reach this bay. And I don't know how well they're going to stand up in this sort of environment. And so that would be my caution. And I guess the other question is, how many other docks are there in this bay that are still standing? Thank you.
Based upon my site visit, there are a number of other docks. I don't know the exact number, but on both sides of this property, there are existing docks that are in existence.
Final question, but I thought when we looked at this application last time, we also saw pictures of docks that had been smashed up by the waves and so forth.
That was the DeBoer one that we were doing.
And that was
It faced to the northwest.
That was a separate application.
Separate application, but the distances are not that dissimilar. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards?
As long as the owner realizes that he may be investing a lot of money in dock repair, et cetera, I'm fine, as long as he's aware. He doesn't come back to us and say, you didn't tell us. I'm wondering whether we should have some lights on this, given that it is in what would otherwise be a channel, and I'm just thinking a couple of lights that, you know, the ones that automatically come on and off at night, so somebody doesn't run into that dock. So, I know people hate lights, but wait till somebody runs into the thing.
Okay, Nick, there's an island out in front which will help break the waves for this, but as I understand it, previous comments were this was a channel where boats were going through. Have we looked at that to consider those comments?
Yes, Your Worship. The only boats that would go through between the island and this property are canoes, kayaks, non-motorized, and for the most part, because that island really, it's very narrow. So there is enough room to get a boat into this island, but there's not really, to this dock, but there's not enough room really to go between the dock and the island for boats passing back and forth, going north and south. It's not, the main channel is beyond the little island that's out there.
Okay. Any further questions or comments, Council? Now you've heard the resolution. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? 2 opposed. The motion carries. And the next one is Dana.
Right, so our next application is a notice of intent. So this is to lift a hold on the subject property located at 4 Island 1740. The subject lands is the middle lot here outlined in black, and it is designated waterfront in the district official plan and Cognishine waterfront community in the township official plan. As you can see, it's the middle property here. It's currently vacant, and it is outlined in red, which shows the existing vegetation. So the purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to remove a hold. So all vacant islands on Georgian Bay are placed into a hold zone, which the hold has to be removed based on the location of the high water mark and the area above the high water mark, and this is done through a plan of survey. So a survey has been submitted, which shows the 177.4 contour, which is the high water mark on Georgian Bay, and confirmed the lot area. So in Cognishine, a hold can be removed if a lot was created after 1981. Those are the preconditions. And the lot was created by consent on May 1985. And the high water mark has been located here. It's a bit hard to see, but it's this thick black line. showing the 177.4 contour. In future, the property is going to be developed with the cottage. It's a little bit hard to see, but it's located here in orange, as well as a septic system, a sleeping cabin, and a dry land boathouse, all which will be in compliance with the zoning bylaw. The lot area of the property is 13,330 square meter, 330 square meters, and it has two frontages since it's a through lot, one being 140.6 meters and the other being 146.3 meters. Current zoning of the property is shoreline residential island type 5, exception 12. So the area of the property and the lot frontage are as existing, so whatever the size they are now. And the exception 12 means that they follow the requirements of the Cognizant residential zone for gross floor area, height, setbacks, and so forth. So the property satisfies the conditions to remove the holds, which is a survey showing the location of the high water mark and the lot area, as well as being created after 1981. It can be developed in Cognizant. Just to give you some visuals of the subject property. This is the west view of the island and the east view of the island. So as you can see, there's significant vegetation. And another eastern view of the island. And this is a southwest view. So there is an existing dock, which in future will be rebuilt in compliance to the zoning bylaw. And this is the future location of a dry land boathouse. And this is the west view, so the edge of the dwelling. There were some markers, but the proposed dwelling hasn't been finalized in the exact location, but it will be moved back beyond those existing markers there. And a view to the south. Another view to the east. As you can see, there's some significant vegetation. And this is the separation between lots, so there is significant buffering between the neighboring property, which will minimize any views in future. And the location of the future sleeping cabin. So staff are satisfied that the preconditions to remove the hold have been satisfied. A survey has been submitted, so staff are recommending that the bylaw be passed and the hold be lifted to allow them to develop the property in accordance with the zoning bylaw.
Here. I will read the resolution first. Moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that Council adopt bylaw 2018-88, being a zoning bylaw amendment to remove a holding symbol on 4 Island, 1740 Georgian Bay in Cognizant. Open it up to Council. Councillor Edwards.
Could you just go back over the rules on a through lot? And my understanding, because I was involved when Cognizant put their plan in, the new rules, and I appreciate this is probably well before the new rules come in 2007 or whatever it was, required 2.5 acres and 600 feet of frontage. But the question of, I thought we only counted the frontage on one side.
So through Mayor Braid, lot frontage is measured independently of one another. And the zone is shoreline residential island type 5, and the lot frontage required is as existing.
But I'm just asking the question. We only measured one side with regard to frontage, is that correct? Because you did mention both sides. I'm just trying to correct my understanding.
Through Mayor Braid, I believe lot frontage is measured on both sides, but I can direct that to Nick to confirm.
No, I don't believe that. I know MPAC was totally messed up on that at one point, but I'm almost positive. So then the question is, what is the frontage on, and either side obviously can be the frontage, but what's the frontage on the east side, right, versus the west side? What are the frontages?
For you, Mayor Braid, one frontage is 140 meters and the other frontage is 146 meters.
So that
About the same.
means then that we are basically under 400 feet of frontage, which fine, I just want to understand that, but the other one, I do want to understand that we're not doubling up by using both sides, because that's not my understanding of what we do.
Through you, Mayor Braid, that is correct. We just take one of the two frontages.
Okay, fair enough.
But in this case, it exceeds the minimum. 140 meters exceeds the minimum required in Cognition.
No, but the point would be that if we were just subdividing this right now, in order to create a new lot, we used to require 400 feet of frontage, but when we went through with our community plan, we took it from 400 feet of frontage to 600 feet of frontage. So I understand this is a pre-existing lot, but I just want to understand that. So I assume that the 146 number, those come to just over 400 feet of frontage, is that correct, when we push the numbers?
140 meters is about 720, I believe. No, sorry, not 520.
Okay, so we're well over the 400 line.
Yeah.
You answered my questions,
Any other questions? I have one. Dana, you mentioned the size in square meters, 13,300 roughly. Is that of this property or the whole island?
Through you, Mayor Braid, it is just these subject lands, so just this property here.
Councillor Cooper?
Which in conversion is about, what, 3.5 to 3 3/4 acres, something like that?
3.28.
Correct, 3.2 acres.
3 point?
3.2 acres.
Okay, I'm overestimating, thank you. And I think, yeah, we don't aggregate frontages, you're just giving us two sets of measurements. And there was a point when somebody tried to, in planning, tried to aggregate the two frontages and say it was, you know, in this particular case, 300 meters, in other words, which would be ridiculous, but that's what happened. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards?
Just as a piece of trivia on that, MPAC was doing that. MPAC was also in the past assessing single owner islands at about 30% of what they were charging for somebody who was on one of these islands. That has now been corrected, but you have to be careful. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I call the question then. All those in favor? And that carries. Morning, Victoria.
Good morning.
Take it away.
Thank you very much. So our next application is 18/21 for Teresa Roy. And again, this is a notice of intent to lift a hold and is not subject to a public meeting. So the property is located at 277 Go Home River Shore in Go Home Bay, specifically in the northern portion of Kings Bay, as you can see here on the map. The lot area is approximately 2.5 hectares and is accessible by water only. So here we have an aerial photograph of the subject lands. And the lands are currently designated Go Home Bay Coastal Waterfront Community in the official plan. So the purpose of this application is to remove the H1 holding symbol that is applied to the subject lands. The removal of the H1 is required prior to any future development on the subject lands. And the purpose of the H1 hold within the zoning bylaw has been placed on properties that are within 500 meters of a waste disposal site. The preconditions for the removal of the H1 hold have been satisfied to staff's satisfaction. So here you can see the existing zoning of the subject lands, this area here. So it is currently zoned Go Home Bay Residential, SR3, with again that H1 hold, and there's also a Fish Habitat 1 zone that is going northwest through the property. So again, the lands were placed under this hold due to a slight portion in this area here that was originally, oh, it's in another map that I'll show you after, within that 500-meter buffer from the waste disposal area. It's actually my other slide I'll just show you. So as you can see here, this is the Roy property, and you can see that little portion in the northeast that was originally in that area of influence. So recently we were provided additional information from the district in regards to the updated potential influence area. And as you can see now, the property is no longer within this area and is no longer subject to any special reports that would be required prior to any future development. So here are some photographs. This is approaching the subject lands here from Kings Bay. And here we have the east portion of the shoreline from the existing dock on the subject lands. An existing boathouse that is located on the property and from the existing dock. And you can see the adjacent lands to the west a bit further through. And here we have the existing dock on the property, and here we're looking directly north to the remainder of the property. And again, here we're looking further north, and this area here is essentially where that FH1, that fish habitat zone, lays on top of. And again, the lands to the west, and a little bit of that fish habitat area that continues further. Here we're looking from the subject lands out to the existing dock and out to the bay. And again, this fish habitat zone area, you can see it's pretty evident where it is in the landscape. And then this is the northwest of the subject lands on top of a large rock outcrop. So this is essentially the rear of the property. And this is looking from that rock outcrop out to the frontage of the subject lands and out to the bay. And this is the lands adjacent to the west, or sorry, the east, my apologies. And here we have the west lands adjacent to the property. And so staff is recommending approval of this application, again, because due to the updated information we received from the district that it is no longer within that potential influence area. And if you have any questions, please let me know. The applicant is also here if you have any questions as well.
Okay, thank you, Victoria. I will read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that Council adopt bylaw 2018-87, being a zoning bylaw amendment to remove the holding symbol on 277 Go Home River Shore, and that's in Go Home Bay. Your agenda says Go Home Lake, but it is Go Home River Shore. So open it up to council for questions, comments. Councillor Cooper.
So I'm a little confused, and that's not hard to do, but I'm just wondering, the name here is Wa, which is also King, I think, but then we were talking about Lougheed, so which is it?
Through your worship, this is the Roy application. The Lougheed is a separate one that we will be speaking to after.
So this is
they are adjacent to each other, though.
They're adjacent to each other,
yes.
Then? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And this is the first of the two?
It is.
Okay, because we saw the name Lougheed up there for a while, and then...
I know, I apologize.
No, I just want to understand what
Yep.
we're looking at here. So these are two, could you give me the overview, so, of the, since we've got two applications here, without getting into a lot of detail in the second one?
Sure.
Just tell me sort of the 10,000-foot story.
So through your worship, essentially, the property here, the Roy property and the Lougheed property here, essentially are the only properties within this bay that are currently not, do not have any main development on it. It is my understanding that through recent opportunities for sale of the lands it became apparent to the owners that there was this hold on the subject lands. And therefore, that is why they are going through this process now, through us getting this correspondence from the district that they are no longer within that area of influence to lift the hold so they can then make a sale of the lands.
Final question, sorry, just for clarification. So that means that the first property is removing the hold so that it can be sold. And I'm assuming, is that the objective here, that the second property owner is acquiring it? Is that what's happening, or do we know?
It's my understanding that both owners are looking to sell in the future,
Okay.
to whomever may be
Thank
willing
you.
to buy.
Councillor Edwards?
This is our infamous Georgian Bay dump, is that correct? This area, what we had the circle around, is that correct? I mean, Larry would probably know, but I know there's been an issue with a dump up there. I'm just curious as to whether that is what this is.
Through your worship, I don't know the history of this specific waste disposal site, if it is the infamous one you may be speaking of or not.
No, I don't.
But I know there was one up there. I've heard that it's closed, but it's not clear to me. But clearly, obviously, they've reduced the impact area of it. But I would just be curious as trivia as to what has happened with that. Has it been covered over?
So through your worship, it's my understanding, so this was the original information that we were provided from the district. When it looks as though when it was still open, this is the impact area. Now it appears as though it is either in the process of or has been decommissioned. And as you can see, it might be hard to see in the text here, but this hatching now represents a non-operating municipal site. So to my understanding, it isn't operating anymore or will not be very soon.
The site, and I'm not sure where it is, but I thought the district owned it. But it has been closed and covered permanently, so. Okay, we'll go to Councillor Bochek first.
Just wondering if we received any letters of opposition. Normally when something happens up there, we hear from the Madawaska Club or from someone. Was there anything from anyone up there?
Through your worship, thank you. Yes, there was letter of support received from Peter Folds on behalf of the Madawaska Club.
Thank you.
Councillor Bianco?
Just to clarify, there's no cottage or buildings on this site?
Through your worship, there is not. There's just an existing dock.
Yeah, I noticed there was I hate to think, call it a scow, but there was something there. Are they living in that? That thing there, is that
the
a living
houseboat?
quarters?
I believe they do on occasion stay on the houseboat. They are here if you wanted to ask them directly.
Okay, so there's nothing on the property in the way of buildings, and you mentioned that there may be plans to sell the property.
That is correct.
And is there a building lot envelope on this property, or is that something that will come later?
So through your worship, upon us of receiving a application for either a building permit or another planning application, we would then review the site to see if it complies for building, but it is zoned for residential development. And it is quite a large lot, so it is under the assumption that it would have a significant building envelope, but again, there's still fish habitat and things like that that we will have to look at as a department.
There were some pictures there, some grass cutting. That area there, that's obviously not a space you could put a cottage in. That's too close to the water and too close. So it would be up in the hill someplace.
That is correct, and it is relatively flat on the top of that rock face, so I assume that's probably where it would be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions, council? See any, then I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that carries. Okay. Okay, and you're on for the next one too, Victoria.
So the next we have application 1820 for Janet Lougheed. Again, this is a notice of intent to lift the H1 hold and is not subject to public meeting. The property is located at 281 Go Home River Shore in Go Home Bay in the northeast portion of Kings Bay. The property is approximately 0.8 hectares in area and is accessible by water only. Here is an aerial of the subject lands, and it is currently designated Go Home Bay Coastal Waterfront Community in the official plan. So similarly, the purpose of this application is to remove that H1 hold upon recent correspondence provided by the district that it is not within the 500-meter buffer of influence area. The preconditions for the removal holding have been met to staff's satisfaction. So here we have the existing zoning of the property. It is SR3 Go Home Bay Residential, again with that hold on it. There is no, there's the fish habitat along the shoreline, but the actual parcel of land is within that SR3 zone. So again, here we have that, this was the original map of influence that we were provided from the district, and you can see even when the site was not decommissioned, it was still outside of that 500-meter area, so it was just kind of essentially that hold was put a bit further out, and that's why we are here today to try and remove it. Again, so here's some more pictures of the property. This is the property here to the east from the bay. The approximate shoreline of the property. And again, the property is along here from that dock of the neighboring property. That's where the picture was taken. And again, here is the approximate area of the property from that large rock face from the Roy's property to the north. And staff is recommending approval of the application, again, given the recent correspondence given from the district, and we're satisfied that the conditions for removal have been met. If you have any questions, please let me know. Oh, and sorry, there was a letter of support from the Madawaska Club from Peter Folds as well.
Thank you. I will read the resolution. It's moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that Council adopt bylaw 2018-86, being a zoning bylaw amendment to remove a holding symbol on 281 Go Home River Shore in Go Home Bay. Open it up to council for questions, comments. Councillor Wienko.
Can you go back to the diagram with the circle on it?
Yes.
If you go down to the legend there, those crosshatches indicate an operating municipal site.
Yes, so this was received, this is the May 22nd map that has the Lougheed property shown. So this is just showing that even when the site was operational, it was outside of that 500 meters. And then there is the more up-to-date one received here.
Yeah.
And this is for the non-operating site. And again, you can see that the property is well without of that area.
Well, it says the first line of this layer is subject to change and is current at May 22nd, 2018, so.
Yes, and this one is June 13, yes. So it is,
Oh.
this is the more recent one that was
So
provided.
within a month, they changed it.
I think they had done some additional studies, and again, the closing changed that
But
area.
I find it very curious that that circle just touches the two properties that are affected, so I'm just wondering if they've done some manipulation of that circle. Is that a perfect 1 kilometer or something, or a half kilometer, or is it just basically they didn't want to include any private property and they drew the line just away from the private
So
property?
the original, through your worship, my understanding is the original buffer was that 500-meter buffer, which is stated in the district official plan and our official plan as well for those holds. And it just so happened where it hit, but also the hold is existent on other properties. It's just these are the two properties that don't currently have development, so that's why they are affected by the hold.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, I will call the question on the resolution. All those in favor? And that one carries also. like you're back on deck again.
All right. So the final application that we have today is for Cant. So you heard the public meeting in August. So since the public meeting, the application has been revised in order to address some of the concerns from council, the Cognishine Cottagers Association, as well as some of the neighboring properties. So the original application requested to remove the hold. The conditions to lift the hold have still been satisfied and have not been changed in the revision. So from the original application, the applicant requested a front yard setback of 15.3 meters to the dwelling wall and 14.55 meters to the eave. The applicant is now requesting a front yard setback of 15.36 meters to the wall and 19.6 meters to this dwelling wall here, as well as 15.34 meters to the eave. They are requesting the original application requested a gross floor area of 240.2 square meters. The application has since been revised to 221 square meters. The original application requested an increase in dwelling width to 30.9 meters. The application has been revised and the dwelling width now complies to the 25 meters that they would be permitted. The original height of the dwelling was 5.5 meters, and this has been revised to 4.33 meters. The maximum height for the property is 6 meters, so they are well under what the zone would allow them. As well as the setback of 20 meters has remained from the original application to this application. So the intent of the front yard setback is to ensure minimal disturbance to vegetation, as well as to maintain a balance and an aesthetic quality of the shoreline. And the current setback is set back beyond what the current watermark is. So as you can see, the high watermark jolts in there, but they are significantly set back, and they are only about half a meter away from the high watermark on this area. However, this location is where the 15 meters is being requested. There were some concerns about the height of the low area, which is located here. So the surveyor has confirmed that the low area is only about 0.3 meters below the 177.4 contour. So if this area was included in the lot area of this portion of the property here, they would be permitted about 191 square meters of gross floor area, so they're only requesting 15% beyond what would be included if this portion of the property was all in one. But since the areas are separated by low areas, we have to use them independently. So the intent of the gross floor area provision is to ensure a balance between built and natural form will be maintained, and the proposed development is in keeping with the development of the surrounding area. And a septic installer has been out on site to ensure that the proposed 20-meter setback is the most appropriate location for the septic. Site plan of control will be applied to the property prior to the construction of any buildings to ensure that the existing vegetation is maintained, as well as phosphorus management is maintained. There were some concerns by the MNR about species at risk. The applicant will build in accordance with the Endangered Species Act 242/08 standards. So if the applicant was not requesting any planning approval, they would be issued a building permit. So since it is an existing lot of record, staff are not requiring an environmental impact study be conducted. They're consistent with the policies 2.17 and 2.1.8 of the provincial policy statement, as well as section D.1.3.4 of the township official plan. So there have been several revisions made in order to address the concerns of the association, council, and surrounding properties. Staff are satisfied with the changes and support the application. So staff are recommending that council pass the bylaw as per the September 5th revision, which is the site plan that you see on the screen here today, for the increase in gross floor area, the reduced setbacks to the dwelling, and the reduced setback to the septic system. So if you have any questions for myself, I'm happy to answer them, as well as the agent is here on behalf of the applicants.
Okay, I'll read the resolution first. Moved by Councillor Bocheck, seconded by Councillor Douglas. Be it resolved that council adopt a bylaw 2018-90, being a zoning bylaw amendment for 6 Island 2520 Cognishing. Open it up to council for questions. Councillor Edwards.
I did go and visit the property along with members of the CCA, the builder, the septic installer, and Greg, the agent. And when you see the property, you get a different picture than what you would get just reading the report. There's a bunch of up and down, but it is a large piece of property. I think that it's this fact that the high water mark issue, the low areas are not that significant, given that it's not going to be surrounded by water, as we had in another application going back 4 or 5 years ago. And I think they're doing everything to try and get the percentages to work. And the fact that they reduced the height is my largest issue. I would also point out that I think we have a structural issue with the fact that while there's notification going out to everybody, the report coming out from the township only hits on Wednesday, and then responses really need to be in by Friday. So I think we have a need to change our structural issues going forward to be fair to anybody, such as the CCA. We're trying to make informed comment on a property. The difficulty being that the original notice doesn't really tell you very much. The guts of it are in the report, and so we have to find a way to have that report coming out with more than just 2 or 2.5 days of lead time. But I went out, walked the property, saw where the septic is going to be located, looked at the other cottages in the area, and I'm happy with it, especially the fact that they've reduced the height.
Other comments, questions? I do have a question. The proposed setback in around the 15 meter, what does Cognishing's plan ask for? Is it 20 or 30?
Through you, Mayor Braid, the required setback is 20 meters.
20 meters, thank you. Anything else, council? I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carries. That concludes our planning council meeting. We do have two more resolutions here, though. Moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that council adopts bylaw 2018-97, being a bylaw confirming the proceedings of the September 10, 2018 Planning Council meeting. Any questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That carries. And final, moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that Planning Council does now adjourn at 11:08 a.m. until Tuesday, October 9th, 2018 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? And that carries. So we'll take a 5-minute break or so before we start our regular council meeting.